I've always been the quiet one in my family. The observer. The guy who shows up, smiles politely, nods through the conversations, then disappears before anyone notices I didn't say much. My name's Julian. I'm 32 now, but this all started when I was 29. Back then, I had just moved back to our hometown after 5 years of grinding in New York's startup scene. I came back with a suitcase, a laptop, and the blueprint for an idea I believed would change my life. My family is the type where loud equals right. My brother Brandon, older by 2 years, was the golden boy from day one. Star athlete in high school, marketing degree from a big-name college, charismatic to a fault, and always on. My parents would hang on his every word at dinner, beam whenever he walked into a room, and measure my own successes against whatever he was doing at the time. I once landed a 6-figure freelance contract and heard my mom say, "That's nice. Brandon just got promoted again." It didn't matter that I was bootstrapping my way through the tech world while he bounced from one cushy job to another, mostly thanks to connections and timing. He had the charm. I had the laptop. Guess which one they valued more? Still, I wasn't bitter. Not then. I'd always told myself I didn't need applause to succeed. I just wanted to build something that mattered, something that was mine. When I came home, it wasn't because I'd failed. Quite the opposite. I'd spent the last 3 years working with small teams building scalable productivity tools, apps that help businesses automate client onboarding, streamline scheduling, cut down the digital clutter. Nothing flashy, but useful, profitable. My latest project, one I'd been developing in late nights and weekends for months, was a tool that helped freelancers manage their entire workflow, contract templates, invoice automation, deadline tracking, and even light AI to suggest optimized pricing based on industry trends. It was ambitious, and it had legs. I'd come back to build it here, where costs were lower and I had a small but trustworthy network. I started renting a co-working space downtown, reconnected with some old developer friends, and even brought on a junior dev I'd mentored a few years earlier. Within a month, we had a working MVP, and I began putting together a pitch deck to send to early-stage investors I'd met during my New York days. Quietly, deliberately, carefully. The only person I made the mistake of telling was Brandon. It was Thanksgiving, and we were sitting out on the porch at my parents' place, both a couple of bourbons in. The rest of the family was inside watching the game, and for a moment, it felt like old times, when we were just brothers, not rivals. "I've been working on something," I said, tapping my phone and pulling up a screenshot of the dashboard UI. Brandon squinted at it. "Looks clean. What is it?" I explained. I told him about the pain points I'd faced as a freelancer, how I was building something to solve them. I walked him through the flow, the pricing model, the competitive edge. I even mentioned the name I'd been toying with, Freelance Flow. His eyebrows went up. "Damn, Jules. That's actually smart. Like, real business potential." I smiled, surprised at the praise. "Yeah, I think so too. What stage are you at?" "MVP's done. Talking to some seed investors next week. If all goes well, I could be hiring by February." He nodded slowly, then took a long sip of his drink. "You ever thought about marketing?" "Of course. Got some ideas. Content funnels, SEO, a few influencer partnerships in the pipeline." He grinned, that same grin he used to get when he found a shortcut in a board game. "Man, if you need help with that, let me know. I've been running ad campaigns for that real estate firm, remember? I've got contacts." I should have stopped there. Politely nodded and changed the subject. But I was stupid. I wanted to believe he genuinely wanted to help. So I said, "Actually, yeah. When we get to that stage, I'd love your input." He clinked his glass against mine and said, "Then we'll make it big, bro." I didn't think much of it after that. We left the porch, he made another round of drinks, and the night ended with our dad giving yet another toast about how Brandon always brings the family together. It wasn't until 6 weeks later that I got the first inkling something was off. I was scrolling through LinkedIn during lunch, mostly out of habit, when I saw a post from Brandon. It was a launch announcement. New startup. New logo. Helping freelancers take control of their business. Same color scheme. Same layout. Same feature list. Almost word for word. My heart started pounding. I clicked the link. The website looked like a polished version of my early prototype. Flashier, more buzzwords, fewer actual features, but undeniably mine. At first, I thought maybe it was a weird coincidence. Maybe he had actually started something similar and didn't mean to copy it. But then I saw the name. Freelancer Pro. I couldn't move for a second. I just sat there, staring at my screen like it had personally betrayed me. I refreshed the page. It was real. It was public. And it had already been shared by 3 mutuals, including a guy I'd planned to pitch that very week. I messaged Brandon, trying to keep my cool. "Hey, saw your new project. Looks familiar. Can we talk?" He didn't reply for hours. When he finally did, the message was maddeningly casual. "Haha, yeah man. I remembered your idea and thought it had potential. Didn't think you were moving fast on it, so I took the initiative. Hope that's cool. Hope that's cool." It was like someone had crawled into my brain, taken the best parts, slapped a new name on them, and paraded them around like a personal trophy. I felt sick. I called him. No answer. I called again. Straight to voicemail. That night, I barely slept. I kept pacing around my apartment, alternating between disbelief and rage. The worst part wasn't just the theft, it was how casual he was about it. Like he had every right to take what I told him in confidence and make it his own. The next week was a blur. I found out 2 of the developers I'd been talking to had already accepted offers from Brandon. He'd offered them higher pay, stock options, and said, "This train is leaving the station, better jump on now." One of my potential investors ghosted me completely. Another politely declined, saying they'd already committed to a similar space. I kept grinding. I kept building. But it felt like trying to climb a mountain while someone shoveled dirt into my face. And every time I saw Brandon, at birthdays, dinners, even a random run-in at a coffee shop, he'd flash that same smirking confidence. He even started posting selfies with his team in our city's trendiest co-working space, using captions like #DisruptTheGame and Built Not Bought. My parents? They were thrilled. My mom kept saying, "Isn't it great that both of you are in tech now? Brandon says his app just hit 10K users." Dad would add, "He's always been the one with the business mind." They didn't know, or they didn't care. Or maybe it was easier to keep pretending Brandon was the genius, and I was the quiet one who played with computers in his room. But I wasn't going to stay quiet forever. I just needed time. And as it turned out, I had a plan. The months that followed were like watching someone else live the life I'd built for myself. Brandon's company, Freelancer Pro, took off faster than even he probably expected. He landed a big feature in a regional startup blog that called him the local tech golden boy, and every family dinner turned into a celebration of his genius. I'd sit there, chewing my food while my mother bragged about Brandon's growing team and his brilliant idea to help the little guy. Meanwhile, my dad would slap him on the back and talk about how proud he was that at least one of his sons understood business. It was like watching someone plagiarize your novel, get a movie deal, and win an award for originality, all while you're told to smile and be supportive. I tried to keep my distance after that, but it's hard when your family insists on weekly get-togethers and constantly drags you back into the same circle that had already chosen their favorite son. I didn't want to be bitter. I didn't want to care. But every time Brandon opened his mouth, it got harder to ignore how much he'd taken from me, and how little anyone seemed to notice. The worst part? He didn't stop at the idea. One afternoon, I got coffee with Marcus, a back-end dev who had helped me test early builds of Freelance Flow. We hadn't talked in a while, and I was hoping to see if he might be interested in coming on board again. He looked sheepish the second he sat down. "Look," he said, "I need to be honest with you. Brandon reached out last month. Said he was looking for a new lead dev, offered me 20% more than what I make now. And I took it." I nodded slowly. I didn't blame Marcus. I blamed the guy who'd built his whole business model around poaching from mine. But what Marcus said next knocked the wind out of me. He showed me some old mock-ups. The ones you and I worked on. The UI flow, the client dashboard. Said they were his early prototypes. I blinked. "Wait, my prototypes?" Marcus shrugged helplessly. He said he'd built them with someone back in New York, but didn't name names. I figured he had some right to them. Maybe you guys partnered at some point. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the table. I could feel the blood rushing to my face. Brandon wasn't just stealing the concept. He was stealing credit for the actual designs. The hours I'd spent refining that interface, testing layouts, analyzing competitor weaknesses, all of it, rewritten under his name. He didn't even change the code, Marcus added after a beat. I checked. "The early CSS? It's yours. Down to the weird spacing bug you told me about." I didn't finish my coffee. I just thanked Marcus and walked out, my head buzzing with static. That night, I pulled up Brandon's app and started digging. I don't know what I expected. Maybe some original improvements, some innovation that would make all this hurt less. But it wasn't there. It was just my skeleton, dressed up in buzzwords and flashy buttons, pumped full of seed money and dripping with arrogance. That was when I hit my first wall. I'd lost my lead devs. I'd lost my early backers. Even my own network had been pulled into his orbit, charmed by the polish and momentum. I tried launching quietly anyway, but the first wave was a disaster. Bugs. Low signups. A few early adopters dropped off after discovering Brandon's app did the same thing. Only more stable, more marketed, more funded. I wanted to scream, but I didn't. I just shut the lid of my laptop and stared at the ceiling. For the first time in years, I questioned whether I even belonged in this space anymore. And that's when the real blow landed. It was my mom's birthday. A big family dinner at a fancy steakhouse, something Brandon insisted on organizing. He booked the private room, sent out formal invites, even hired a photographer to capture the memories. I almost didn't go, but guilt got the better of me. When I arrived, everyone was already there. My parents, aunts, uncles, cousins, even some of Brandon's coworkers who had become family friends through proximity and charm. I greeted my mom, handed her a small gift, a vintage necklace I knew she'd like, and tried to disappear into the background as usual. Brandon showed up 20 minutes late, loud, laughing, holding a wine bottle in one hand and his girlfriend in the other. Everyone clapped when he entered, like royalty had arrived. I just sat there, sipping water, trying not to count the minutes until I could leave. But then, halfway through dinner, Brandon stood up with his glass raised and said, "I want to make a toast." Everyone quieted down. He smiled, put a hand on Mom's shoulder, and began talking about how she'd always supported him, how she believed in his dreams even when others doubted, and how proud he was to give back now that he was finally seeing real success. He talked about his journey, how he bootstrapped from nothing and built a platform from scratch with sweat and vision. People nodded along. Some even clapped. My parents beamed. And then, he said this. I remember sitting on the porch with Julian a couple years back, talking about ideas. And he said something that stuck with me. Something about how freelancers don't need more tools, they need smarter ones. That line sparked something in me. And that's where Freelancer Pro really began. There it was. The bone he threw me. The little half-truth to make it all seem like I'd been inspired by him. Not that I built it. Not that it was mine. Just a passing comment I made over drinks that he had the brilliance to act on. I didn't say anything. Not then. But I remember gripping the edge of the table so tightly my knuckles turned white. After the dinner, I stepped outside to get some air. My aunt followed me out a few minutes later. Are you okay? She asked gently. I nodded. Just needed a break. She hesitated. Julian, you know we're all really proud of Brandon. But you shouldn't give up on your ideas, okay? You're smart too. You've got potential. I smiled, nodded again, and walked to my car. That night, I didn't sleep. I just lay awake, staring at the dark, my mind racing. That was my breaking point. It wasn't just the stolen idea. It was the fact that everyone let him do it. The fact that my own family saw me as the supporting character in my own story. The fact that even my attempts to stay silent were being rewritten as passive admiration. So I made a decision. I shut down Freelance Flow. I archived every file, cleared out the co-working space, and vanished from the local tech radar. Let them think I was done. Let them laugh about how Brandon had won. Let them forget about the quiet one who just played with computers in his room. I would disappear from their world. And I would build something better. Not out of spite. Not out of pettiness. But because I was done playing fair with people who only saw value in the loudest voice. 2 months later, I flew back to New York. And that's where things started to change. But they wouldn't see that until it was too late. When I landed at JFK, I didn't have a master plan. I had a duffel bag, a worn-out laptop, and a chip on my shoulder the size of my brother's ego. I hadn't been back to New York in almost a year, not since I left thinking I'd be smarter to build closer to home. That thought alone made my stomach turn. The irony wasn't lost on me, running back to where I started, like a failed experiment crawling back to the lab. I rented a shoebox apartment in Astoria. 4th floor walk-up, no elevator, and a heater that groaned like it was personally offended by the cold. But the rent was cheap, by New York standards, and it was enough for what I needed. I wasn't there to play tourist or hang out in Soho cafes posting #HustleLife selfies. I was there to disappear, rebuild, and rise in silence. For the first month, I did nothing but read and write code. No job hunting. No investor calls. No social media. I ghosted group chats and ignored family texts. I needed the noise gone. I needed to sit in the silence of my own thoughts, as uncomfortable as that was. I'd been burned. Humiliated. Outpaced by someone who didn't even understand the product he was building. I needed to feel that. And I did. For weeks. But it didn't break me. Because beneath the shame and the bruised ego, there was something else brewing. Something sharper. I knew where Brandon's version of my idea was headed. I watched it quietly from the shadows. I subscribed to his app under a fake email and poked through the features. Flashy updates. Surface-level polish. But no real substance. He was expanding too fast. Too wide. I saw him announcing new features weekly on LinkedIn. Features that weren't stable yet. Features that felt more like ideas tossed together by a marketing team than anything built with real user empathy. And worst of all, he was burning through cash like it was monopoly money. I knew because I knew him. Brandon was allergic to patience. He was spending on office space, branded merch, sponsored content, and culture retreats for a team that hadn't even found product market fit yet. Meanwhile, I went the opposite direction. I stopped thinking about competition. I stopped thinking about revenge. I started thinking about users. Every morning, I opened Reddit, Discord communities, and niche freelance forums. I talked to real freelancers, copywriters, illustrators, indie devs, translators. I asked questions, listened, took notes. What sucked about their current tools? What workflows were clunky? What costs made them hesitate to grow? One thing kept coming up: fragmentation. Everyone was juggling 10 different apps for time tracking, client management, contracts, invoices, and project delivery. And they hated it. That became my new angle. Not just a dashboard for freelancers. A command center. One login. One interface. One place where everything just flowed. So I got to work. I renamed the project. No more freelance flow. That chapter was burned. I needed something bolder. Something that wouldn't be confused with a bootleg knockoff. I called it Solo Core. It started simple. Clean UI. No gimmicks. Just a tight, fast tool that let you onboard clients, track project stages, get paid, and automate the boring parts. But behind the scenes, I was laying the groundwork for something deeper, an AI assistant that would learn your preferences and help you run your solo business like a one-person agency. By month 3, I had a functional alpha build, but I didn't rush to market. This time, I tested everything. I invited 10 freelancers I'd met in Discord servers to try the tool for free and give brutally honest feedback. I told them, I don't want compliments. I want complaints. And they delivered. The UI was too busy. The calendar sync was glitchy. The AI felt too robotic. I took every note personally, and then rewrote the backend twice over. In the meantime, I started reaching out to the right kind of investors. Not the guys who just wanted to throw money at something shiny, but the ones who understood the grind. I pulled favors. I reconnected with a mentor from my first startup who once told me, Julian, you don't need to be the loudest guy in the room, just the one who never leaves. He introduced me to 2 angel investors who specialized in bootstrap founder-led projects. One of them used to freelance himself. That helped. They didn't ask for flash. They asked for numbers, feedback, retention. I showed them everything. The usage data, the raw testimonials, the rebuilds, the pain points I'd solved not just with guesses, but with research. They were impressed. 1 month later, I had $400,000 in early-stage funding. I cried when the wire hit my account. Not out of joy, out of relief. Because for the first time in 2 years, someone believed in my version of the idea. But I still wasn't ready to go public. Instead, I used the funding to do what Brandon never did. I built a team slowly, carefully. I found a brilliant UX designer named Raina who'd spent years freelancing herself and understood the exact daily chaos Solo Core was trying to fix. I hired Dev, an indie dev from Vancouver I met on a late-night Discord call, who rewrote the AI engine from scratch to feel more mentor than machine. And I brought back one familiar face. Marcus, the guy Brandon had poached from me. He'd burned out after 6 months working under Brandon's visionary leadership. Apparently, the team had been churning out rushed updates to hit artificial milestones for investors, and the culture had turned toxic fast. When I messaged him, his reply was instant. I've been waiting for this. I paid him more than Brandon ever did, and I gave him a stake. Over the next 6 months, Solo Core transformed from a scrappy rebuild to a quiet powerhouse. No ads, no social blasts, just word of mouth, organic growth, and invite-only access. Every new user had to be referred by an existing freelancer. That gave it a sense of exclusivity and trust. Within 4 months, we had a 92% retention rate and a wait list of over 6,000 freelancers. And I still hadn't told a soul in my family. They thought I'd failed, that I'd tapped out, that Brandon was the only tech success in the family. They sent me photos of his company holiday party, his new branded hoodies, even a billboard he paid for in downtown just to flex. I said nothing. I just replied with a thumbs-up emoji and got back to work. Then, something happened. A popular YouTuber who specialized in freelance tech tools did a surprise review of Solo Core. I didn't send it to him. A user on his Discord had recommended it. He called it the cleanest, smartest tool I've used in years, and said it felt like someone finally built a platform for us, not for the pitch deck. Overnight, our waitlist tripled. That was the first time Brandon noticed something was off. I know because he emailed me. Subject line, is this you? All he wrote was a link to the video and a question mark. I didn't reply, because it didn't matter what he knew. He had built a tower out of borrowed bricks, all flash and no foundation. And while he was busy climbing it, I was digging tunnels underneath. But I wasn't done yet. Because if I was going to do this right, I needed to hit him where it hurt. Not with a lawsuit. Not with some online takedown. I was going to do it with silence. And with strategy. Because Brandon's company was starting to crack at the seams, and he didn't even know it yet. And what I was planning next would leave him no choice but to watch everything collapse. But first, I had one more piece to move into place. The setup began the moment I stopped seeing Brandon as my brother and started seeing him as a business problem. Don't get me wrong. This wasn't about spite anymore. At least, not in the way it used to be. I'd spent too many nights in my tiny Astoria apartment dragging myself through code, design, testing, rebuilding, over and over, until the fire that once burned purely with rage had cooled into something sharper. Strategic. Calculated. This wasn't just payback. This was chess. And I was already 10 moves ahead. The key to everything was timing. Brandon's company, Freelancer Pro, had been living on borrowed momentum. His whole operation was built like a startup meme page come to life. All surface, no depth. Every time I quietly checked in on their progress, I saw new press releases, new partnerships, vague feature drops, and relentless marketing spam. Everything but real user traction. The cracks had started to show. One of his customer support reps posted anonymously on a subreddit for startup horror stories. They talked about the insane churn rate, how users would sign up, get overwhelmed by bugs, and leave within days. Investors were pushing for growth, and Brandon responded by slashing QA and doubling the ad budget. It was unsustainable, and I knew it. But I needed proof. Real proof. So I reached out to an old college friend, Jay, who now worked in SaaS data analytics. I asked for a favor. Nothing illegal, just insights. Jay pulled some traffic estimates, bounce rates, and third-party churn data from public APIs and other tools I didn't even know existed. The numbers painted a perfect picture. Brandon's app had peaked 6 months earlier. Since then, user growth had flatlined, active usage was declining, and refund requests had tripled. Meanwhile, his spending was increasing. His marketing campaign for Q3 alone cost more than my entire build. He's flying blind. Jay said over our encrypted call. That or he's desperate. Exactly what I needed to hear. But the real opportunity came during a casual conversation with Reina, my lead designer. She'd just wrapped a feedback call with a group of power users, freelancers making over $100,000 per year using Solo Core to manage clients at scale. She said something that stuck with me. They're all on Slack together, she said. A private group. They trade clients, tools, contracts. And they hate Freelancer Pro. I sat up. Wait, what do you mean? One of them showed me a thread. They called it a shiny panic button for people who don't want to think. Brutal, but honestly, accurate. Think they'd ever switch if we made an offer? Reina hesitated, then smiled. I think they're waiting for one. So I asked her to find the ringleader, someone who had the ear of the group, someone influential. 2 days later, she introduced me to Hannah. Hannah was a powerhouse. UX writer by trade, 6-figure solo consultant, and brutally honest. I hopped on a call expecting skepticism. Instead, she opened with, "Took you long enough." I laughed, and just like that, we clicked. We talked for almost 2 hours. She walked me through every pain point she'd seen in the freelance tools market, especially Freelancer Pro. How Brandon's app overpromised, underdelivered, and ignored feedback unless it came with a blue check mark. How the platform felt like it was built by someone who heard freelancers existed, but never was one. She ended the call with, "If you're ready to move, I've got 50 names." And just like that, the dominoes began to line up. Over the next 2 weeks, I worked with Hannah to craft a beta program for Solo Core Pro, our advanced tier designed for high-income solo operators. Contract automation, deep client analytics, and an AI assistant that could write outreach emails, quote pricing based on historical data, and even build pitch decks in under 5 minutes. We positioned it as a consultant's secret weapon. But here's where the setup really began. We offered it to 100 hand-picked freelancers, many of whom were already active on Freelancer Pro. We made it exclusive, invite only. Each user had to sign an NDA, and we promised them early access, personalized onboarding, and lifetime perks if they helped stress test the system. Within 10 days, 92 signed up. Word started spreading, quietly, strategically, inside those freelancer circles. People weren't just trying Solo Core, they were switching. Some deleted their old Freelancer Pro accounts on stream and tweeted cryptic things like, "Sometimes you don't realize how bad a tool is until you try one built by someone who actually cares." I watched it all unfold without saying a word publicly. Not a tweet, not a press release. And then came the opening I didn't expect. Brandon reached out again. This time he called. I let it ring once, twice, then answered, calm as ever. "Hey," I said. "Hey bro," he said, casual as always, like we hadn't spoken in over a year. "You got a minute?" I said nothing, letting the silence work. He finally added, "I've been hearing things." "Oh, yeah man. People are talking about some new thing, Solo Core? That's you, right? I don't really talk about work with family anymore." He chuckled. "Come on, Julian. It's just us. I know it's you. I've had 2 users tell me they jumped to it. Said it's cleaner, smarter, AI or something." I didn't respond. Then he sighed and said, "Look, we should grab coffee. Talk strategy. Might be ways to, I don't know, collaborate." I almost laughed. "Collaborate? You mean like last time?" I asked, the smile obvious in my voice. There was a pause on his end. A long one. "That wasn't what it looked like," he said eventually. "No," I replied. "It was exactly what it looked like." He tried again. "We're both killing it, right? Maybe we pool resources, dominate the space together." That's when I realized. He wasn't just curious. He was worried. The golden boy was feeling the cold. I ended the call with, "I'll think about it," and blocked his number 5 minutes later. But I wasn't done. The final part of the setup came down to one move. One that would send a message not just to Brandon, but to the entire freelance SaaS world. I decided to host a live demo week. Each day, we'd showcase a different Solo Core feature in action. Real users, real tools, real workflows. No fluff, just power. We launched it quietly, with a referral-only sign-up. No ads. By the end of the week, we had 12,000 viewers and over 3,000 signups. Brandon? He tried to do a response webinar on the final day. It crashed halfway through. People complained about audio, bugs, broken features, and some even said, publicly, that they were done with Freelancer Pro. The setup was complete. His users were now our users. His team was cracking under pressure. His name was starting to lose its shine. And I hadn't even gone public yet. But the final blow? That was coming. And when it landed, it would make everything he'd built collapse under its own stolen weight. Brandon never saw the final move coming. He couldn't. Because by the time I pulled the trigger, he was too busy trying to plug the holes in a ship that was already sinking. I waited until the cracks in Freelancer Pro were wide enough for sunlight to pour through. The timing had to be perfect. No earlier. No later. And when the moment arrived, it wasn't dramatic. It wasn't some big explosion. It was quiet. Surgical. The first blow came from inside his own house. I got a message from Sasha, one of Brandon's former operations leads. I didn't know her personally, but she had reached out through a mutual connection after hearing I was behind Solo Core. She had been with Brandon since the early days and had seen everything. The rushed launches, the missed payrolls, the shallow updates dressed in buzzwords. And now she was out, burned, bitter, and ready to talk. We met in a quiet cafe in Brooklyn. I stayed because I believed in the product, she said, stirring her coffee slowly. But there was no vision. Just ego. Every time someone gave actual feedback, Brandon called it negativity. He surrounded himself with yes men. She handed me a folder. It wasn't full of secrets, nothing confidential, nothing illegal. But it was full of truth. Churn rates, user complaints, unfulfilled promises to investors. Proof that Freelancer Pro had stopped growing months ago, even though Brandon kept claiming otherwise. He's trying to raise another round, Sasha added. He needs a win. He's calling it a bridge round, but it's just to keep the lights on. I thanked her, offered her a position on my operations team, and walked away knowing I had everything I needed. Because Brandon didn't just need money. He needed a miracle. And I was about to take away the last one he had. 2 weeks later, I announced the public launch of Solo Core. No fluff. No champagne. Just a tweet. We've spent 2 years listening to freelancers. Building with them. Learning from them. Welcome to Solo Core, your freelance business, unified. Built by freelancers. Built for freelancers. We're ready. The tweet blew up. Our wait list of 30,000 opened overnight. Existing users shared their results. Case studies dropped. Influencers in the freelance world started creating content without us asking. And on day 3, we dropped the final piece. The migration tool. With a single click, users could import their entire client history, invoices, contacts, and schedules from Freelancer Pro automatically into Solo Core. Clean UI. Zero friction. I even paid for ads on the tool's landing page with the headline. Time to upgrade from copycats. Move your freelance business to Solo Core in 60 seconds. The floodgates opened. We had 8,000 users switch in the first week. Then 15,000. Then entire agencies that had used Brandon's product to onboard contractors switched over and tweeted, never looking back. Brandon? He was silent. For a while. But I knew he wouldn't stay that way. It was day 10 of our launch when he finally broke. He went live on LinkedIn with a video titled, Setting the Record Straight. I watched with popcorn in hand. He looked tired. Less polished than usual. The energy was still there. He was always good on camera, but the cracks were visible. Look, I know there's a lot of noise right now, he said. Some competitor trying to make waves. Copying our space. I won't name names, but I'll say this. Building a company takes courage. Not just code. It takes risk. And vision. And we're not going anywhere. The comments disagreed. Hard. People dragged him for his vision. They brought receipts. Side-by-side screenshots showing identical dashboard layouts from a year ago. Complaints about bugs that had gone unresolved. Tweets like, bro, you literally stole your brother's idea. And you did it worse. Not Julian launching a better version in silence and eating your lunch. This aged like milk. I didn't reply. Not once. But I didn't have to. Because on day 14, we announced our team expansion initiative, a hiring program designed specifically for devs and designers with experience in freelancer SaaS platforms. Every recruiter in the tech scene knew what it meant. I poached 5 of his senior engineers. I offered double salaries, stock options, and, more importantly, leadership input. They weren't joining a rebound. They were joining a vision. One of them even tweeted, left the house of cards, joined a fortress, thanks at Solo Core. Then came the final collapse. 3 weeks after our launch, a Medium post dropped. It was titled, How I Wasted $2.1 Million Building the Wrong Startup. It was written by one of Brandon's original investors. The post went viral. He detailed everything. How he was seduced by charisma, how he ignored red flags, how Brandon's team burned through cash while chasing flashy features and never cared about user retention. He never named SoloCore, but the message was clear. By the end of the month, Freelancer Pro laid off half its staff. Their Twitter went dark. The live chat on their homepage quietly disappeared. And then, in a move that nearly made me laugh out loud, Brandon updated his LinkedIn title from founder and CEO of Freelancer Pro to former tech exec open to work. I didn't block him this time. I let him watch every new milestone, every press feature, every testimonial from users he once had but couldn't keep. And then, because the universe loves poetic timing, I got an email from him. Subject: let's talk. Body: hey Julian, I know things didn't go the way either of us expected. I just wanted to say congrats on SoloCore. It's a hell of a product. If you're hiring, I'd love to chat. I still have a lot to offer. No ego. Just looking for a fresh start. Hope we can talk soon. Brandon. I stared at the screen for a long time. Not because I was unsure, but because there was a time, years ago, when I would have wanted this. The apology. The admission. The reversal. But now I just felt nothing. So I opened a blank reply. Typed 2 words. We're good. And hit send. No drama. No speech. Just closure. The next morning, I went back to work. I had a product roadmap to review, a call with Raina about our next feature rollout, and a Slack channel full of freelancers sharing stories about how SoloCore helped them finally scale without chaos. Brandon had taken my idea, but I'd taken it back, and I'd built something stronger. The kind of strength that doesn't need a spotlight, because the results speak for themselves. And as for Brandon, well, some lessons hit hardest when they arrive without a mic drop. Just silence, and the sound of everything you built collapsing behind you.